www.stoptnr.com, which is kind of crazy that that was still available, but
I was about to say the same thing.
but it was. We have it.
You are listening to Urban Wildlife Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Urban Wildlife Podcast. As always, we are a part of the Wildlife Observer Network. Please check out all of our wonderful podcasts. Today we have a discussion about cats, outdoor cats. It's been a while since we've had an outdoor cat discussion. Some advocates from Tulsa reached out to us. We're going to hear about their challenges on the local, regulatory level over this issue of policies around outdoor cats, basically. As always, you can reach out to us at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com, which is how these folks got in touch with us. We say it many times. If you've got an idea for a podcast, please tell us, because we quite often say yes and invite you on to talk more about what you got going on. And of course, you can hit us up on Twitter at UrbWildlifeCast. We also have a Facebook page, which has been a little quiet lately, but still we keep an eye on it. So if you got any ideas, it's another way you can get in touch with us. I'm one of your co-hosts, Billy Brown, and this is Tony Crosdale, another one of our co-hosts.
Howdy.
And then Zach, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, yeah, I'm Zach Poland, Tulsa resident. I have a science background. I would say that I'm pretty passionate about, ecology, science, all aspects of this issue, and, looking forward to talking to you all. Big fan of the entire family of podcasts that you guys put out. So appreciate you having me on.
Great. And Valerie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Valerie O'Brien. I am a Tulsan as well. I was born in Tulsa, moved away for a little while, and then have been here again since 1988. And I have always loved nature and the outdoors, animals of all sorts, and that's led me to become a wildlife disease ecologist. I got my PhD here in Tulsa, working on the effects of an introduced species on disease dynamics. So I've always been interested in how what we would call anthropogenic influences affect the environment and affect animals living in that environment. So I've done some research on anthropogenic effects of on mosquitoes and midges and insects that birds eat, things like that. I also happen to have done some animal welfare work here in Tulsa starting in the 90s. I worked within the Tulsa Animal Shelter trying to help get pets adopted, and have done fostering and things like that. So I come at this from a couple of different places, a couple different directions.
That's awesome. And I think maybe we'll call you back about midges and mosquitoes.
Would love it. I was thinking about that. I'd love to talk to you about that.
I'm Pam Gocher, and I'm an attorney. I'm a retired attorney with JP Morgan, and I'm a Tulsan. I've been interested in this issue. I've also been interested in animal welfare for many years. I was on the board of SPAY Oklahoma, and I just love nature. I love birds. I love wildlife. And I've always thought that we need to be sensible about dealing with overpopulation of cats and dogs in Tulsa, all over the country.
I was thinking about this like an hour ago. I was like, I'll maybe Tony or I will start off with like our short version of what TNR is and sort of why outdoor cats are a bad idea for reasons that have to do with wildlife, because this is the Urban Wildlife Podcast. But then I thought, hey, let's ask our guests. Valerie, why is it a bad idea to have cats outside?
Well, one of the things that I find it a bad idea in a number of different ways. And one of those things I know that Zach is very passionate about as well is the effects on wildlife. Cats are introduced species, just like house sparrows are, and they happen to also be domesticated animals. And because of that, our ecology, the environment that they are in, if they're outdoors, is not really natural environment to live in. And that's pretty evident when you recognize that. I mean, last time I went out to a natural area, Turkey Mountain or somewhere, a state park or somewhere, I didn't see feral cats running around. There was a reason for that. They can't survive without being fed. They have not naturalized, like, for example, house sparrows have. House sparrows were introduced 150 years ago from Europe, and house sparrows now have been very successful. They're on all continents, but Antarctica, and that'll be coming. Cats, on the other hand, depend on humans to survive. However, cats outside are very damaging to various types of wildlife. And I think there are other reasons also that I'd love to talk about. And Zach will have more, I'm sure, information about the kinds of impacts that cats have on other, on wildlife.
Sounds like a great segue to Zach. Zach, what are some of those impacts?
I agree with everything that Valerie said. I am a birder. That's pretty much my main hobby. So anytime I see any sort of invasive species or whatever introduced species, that's always a concern. The ecologic impacts of this species is huge. And but beyond that, I think what is unique maybe about this situation is that it impacts human health or public health. There's a property rights issue associated with it. There is all these ancillary issues of this thing that it really has, in Tulsa's particular case, and I assume this is happening all over the country, is it really has united a huge group of people with sometimes quite different focus areas or whatever, and it's united us on this particular issue, whether it's business owners, homeowners, concerned about what my neighbor is doing with allowing these domesticated species to run rampant across the neighborhood, or you're looking at it from a human health, animal health, ecologic impact. It's bad on all those levels, and it's appalling that this is going on, or the attempts to make this okay.
And so the this that we're talking about, I think, is what will be sometimes called what the advocates for it call TNR, or trap, neuter, release. And so, just really quick version, it's the idea that if you neuter the cats that are outside that are unowned, then they'll stop having babies, and thus they will dwindle away all on their own. I see head shaking, but that's the logic. That's the purported logic of it. We've talked a lot on this podcast about how that in practice doesn't actually work very well, because this is usually coupled with feeding operations where people are putting out food for cats, which then feeds the unneutered cats. Also, it sort of adds as a big magnet for people who are dumping cats. And so you never really it's really hard to actually reduce these sort of local outdoor cat populations if you're throwing food at them, even if you are neutering some of them. In the meantime, they're still out there, posing disease risks. They're still out there, wandering into your garden and pooping in it. They're still out there killing birds or snakes or frogs or chipmunks, what have you. With that sort of out there, we know sort of why cats are a big problem. They kill on the order of billions of small animals around North America. Tony and I have we both witnessed this, with different species, birds or snakes and things like that. One of the things I find interesting about this issue, as someone whose my own background is actually public policy, is that you have some issues that are national, where you have national organizations fighting it out, let's say Sierra Club dealing with legislative policy on a national level around some big polluting industry. This is one, though, that happens at the local level, where all of these legislative regulatory battles seem to happen in city councils and county boards and that kind of stuff. And so this is one of the reasons that when these folks reach out to us, this is a neat thing to talk about, because it's this is where the rubber actually meets the road. So let's hear about sort of whether Valerie or Zach, what is happening in that legislative way in Tulsa? What is going on that is uniting you guys and is the challenge that you're facing?
Well, I think if I might, I want to add something to what you said first about this idea of this happening locally. I've been thinking a lot about my experience as an animal welfare volunteer and my experience trying to work within our Tulsa animal shelter in trying to get animals adopted. And I will say, when you witness the suffering and the abundance of animals that come through the doors of an underfunded, understaffed facility, it radicalizes you. It can really radicalize you. It can cause you to become angry and frustrated. You keep trying. Every week you come back. Every week you volunteer. Every week you try to get animals adopted. And yet more and more and more are euthanized and more come in. And I actually stopped volunteering at Tulsa Animal Welfare a couple of years ago, probably about 3 years ago. I just hit my last straw because it was so desperate that I felt I was emptying the ocean with a teaspoon and I could not emotionally handle it anymore. And I think that's an important thing for us to understand about why people would turn to this sort of pseudo solution to this problem. These are people that are animal lovers. They happen to love cats, or that's what they get focused on. And other people love dogs and other people love horses. And they become focused on this. And this is presented to them. For one thing, sometimes they will feed because they love these animals. They can't stand to see them suffer. They know that if they take them to animal shelter, they're likely to be euthanized. And so they feed them because they don't want them to die. That is understandable. It's hard to get past that, I think, emotional sense when you're trying to, I know that as a policy person, that that emotions trump attempts to beget policy constantly. You're always having to talk about, well, how do we deal with humans being so illogical and irrational frequently with these kinds of things? Well, there's a reason that we become illogical and irrational. We're not just born that way necessarily. And some of us, like Zach and myself, and it sounded like Tony, become science nerds, and we read research papers and we become versed in that. And so we use a different kind of mental framework. So I didn't mean to not answer that question, but I would say that that particular, I believe that TNR takes advantage of a sense of desperation. And when it is presented as a solution to constant euthanasia, then more and more of these radicalized individuals get on board with it because they don't see a solution. There isn't one that's being offered to them. And I think that we have to understand something important about TNR. It's about no kill. It's about not killing cats. It's not about lowering cat populations per se. I mean, lowering cat populations would be an indirect way to not kill cats, right? Because the less kittens you have, the less cats you have, the less cats get killed. Sure, that would be great. But we know from the data that that's not what happens. This is about no kill. And that's an important thing I think we have to consider too. As far as how it got started in Tulsa, the only thing I think that I would say, and then maybe Zach will have more on that, because I know Zach has followed this closely. I've met him early on in these animal welfare commission meetings, is that I witnessed the helplessness that the Tulsa animal welfare employees had in being able to solve the problem. And so I think it would make it really easy for organizations to come in and influence people who are trying to do this. And I believe that's largely maybe what has occurred. Some of the organizations that are now completely on board with TNR were not completely on board with TNR when I volunteered at the shelter years ago. They were all about spay and neuter. Tulsa Alliance for Animals was all about spay and neuter, and now is very much in favor of that.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the previous question. I mean, if I can for a second, is this appears to be a local issue, but the reality of the situation is you have national organizations who are in favor of TNR, who are singling out municipalities, counties, and bringing their money into these places and are winning, quote unquote, battles on a county and city level. This appears to be a city, municipal, local issue, but the reality of the situation is these are national organizations who are fighting local battles against often a ununited and underfunded
and
opposition and win.
So you've got a national group like Best Friends, which has done this 100 times before, and then you have your local birders, other animal welfare advocates who don't believe in TNR, who never fought this legislative battle before, and so you're sort of caught flat-footed.
This has been going on. I mean, let's be frank. This has been going on with individuals and organizations on some level in Tulsa and, countrywide for a long time. This in Tulsa came to a head. We've been fighting this thing, TNR, for 2 or even 3 years now. And we've been having ongoing public meetings associated with the Animal Welfare Committee that is appointed by the mayor of the city of Tulsa, specifically to handle some of the evaluation and quote unquote modernization. I use that in a pretty loose term, city ordinances associated with animal welfare and ownership. So TNR was originally formally introduced as a potential city ordinance change to, let's be real, right now, you can't abandon pets in the city of Tulsa or most places, which is what this is. I mean, this is basically abandonment of pets on a large scale and distributing them out in the city. So the proposal was to change the city ordinances in order to allow trap, neuter, release and make it part of the animal control apparatus, I guess is how I would describe it. And that's been going on for about 3 years now.
Basically what we're seeing, which you see a lot of places, is that after TNR has been going on, usually like volunteers are doing it kind of with a nod and a wink in a lot of places from the animal control officials, that then what happens is the national organizations like Best Friends or Alley Cat Allies, groups like that will come in and sort of help the folks who are the local TNR practitioners or advocates to then seek sort of official legal recognition of the practice. So that way, no one can say that they're violating the law by dumping a whole bunch of cats outside in a park or in an alley behind a shopping center or something like that. And so that way it protects it so that when people who, for all the reasons we've been talking about, for public health or animal welfare or environmental reasons having to do with wildlife, when those folks then say, hey, wait, what are we doing with all these cats, parked out here next to the park over there? There's it's a terrible idea to have them there. They can't do anything about it because now it's protected by law. Oftentimes these can go back and forth, like with all the twists and turns of any local legislative or regulatory battle. For people who might get sort of glaze over with maybe all the details of what can happen at a local level, sort of where are you guys sitting now? Like, talk a little bit about the coalition that's come together, or the folks who have banded together to try to advocate for what we would tend to consider to be good policy.
I was very excited to see at first when the Animal Welfare Commission had begun. I attended as a citizen, just saw the announcements about it and attended. And I remember meeting Zach there. He was very outspoken at meetings, and obviously other people in the community were as well. But there hasn't been an organized, at least visible to me, there wasn't a really openly organized opposition for the reasons that were outlined. It for one thing, you got a bunch of nerds. We're not that great at this stuff. We like to go outside and look at lizards and stuff. And we're not policy people, and we're not political, and things like that. And people are coming at it from lots of disparate places, so it's really hard to get people together, as you've said. So was excited to learn about what was going on with this organization, and I think that we can build on this. And I'm hoping that we can present a very compassionate yet reasoned argument for why we need to have different solutions, why this is not the solution to cat overpopulation or cat suffering. And that's where we are right now. It seems like things are at, I wouldn't say a lull, but they're not at a fever pitch. And so there may be some time to put some things forth, although we know that the TNR proponent organizations are working very hard to put out some public statements and are continuing to lobby and so forth. So I think we have time, but at the same time, we need to take action. I think there's a lot of potential to try to bring these disparate folks together that have some questions about TNR, don't think it's necessarily a good idea. And one of the groups I'd like to honestly bring in are people who worked in animal welfare and who care about the lives of animals. Of domestic animals, I consider this inhumane to cats. It's not humane. I watched a community cat killed by a dog in the street while I was sitting on my porch having a beer one night. And it was a dog on a leash that a young woman was walking. It was tragic. It was traumatic. It was traumatic for the cat. It was traumatic for the young woman. It was traumatic for the neighbors. We should care enough about the cats to not have them undergo that kind of death. We should care enough for the community that we should not have our community members subject to dead animals in the street, starving cats with their eyes crusted over, watching their beloved dog kill a cat in the backyard. These are things that I think that's important for people to think about when they're thinking about this issue.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons that I get frustrated with the term no kill. Because it's basically no kill in the shelter.
Yeah, it moves the killing to some other place where it's harder to witness, right?
It makes the shelter numbers go down. I think that one of the issues that we have, and as a scientist, I'm very interested in counting things. I'm interested in numbers. I'm interested in quantifying. And one of the things that we have at animal shelters are metrics. We have numbers of animals that come in. We have where the animals come from. We have numbers of animals that we euthanize. They're required to keep those kinds of metrics. One of the things that we don't tend to have and that we don't fund are surveys and more environmental metrics. So we don't know how many cats are run over by cars every year. We don't know how many cats are truly at large in Tulsa County. And it's easy to look at the place where they have to enumerate in order to, they have to report. And so it's easy to look at those numbers and try to change those numbers than it is to say, yeah, we don't really know. Let's go out and, we can't really afford to pay somebody to go around and see how many. So we don't really know. So I think that's one of the reasons that no kill is as popular as it is and why the focus is there, because we can count.
Maybe Zach, introduce us to birding in Tulsa. I know that I myself am more of a herping guy, but I know people like birds too. Tony and I could go on forever about like what interesting birds we see in places in Philadelphia people don't always think of as birding, and I'm using air quotes here, nature spaces or wild spaces. What are highlights if you got binoculars and you're walking around Tulsa?
What time of year? I mean, we got everything. We've got wintering Smith's longspur in the city limits of Tulsa. We've got breeding.
I was going to mention Smith's longspur as soon as talking about birding in Tulsa. Yeah. I was like, that's your bird, right? That's your like classic, like big deal bird.
How about Harris sparrows, Tony?
Yeah, we got Harris's sparrows winter. We got breeding, interior lease terns on the Arkansas River. I can go on and on. We got eastern warblers in migration. We've got gulls and ducks on the man-made lake. So I could talk all day about this, but I mean, yeah.
Well, I think it's good to mention because it's stuff like we're not doing, people who get frustrated about outdoor cats aren't doing it because they have some kind of abstract dislike of outdoor cats or something like that. It's because we see an impact on things that are valuable, and I think that are beautiful and wonderful and are worth highlighting. Also, I think Tony once Tony, you talk about, I'm about to say what you said, but when you had found that just like as a cat in your neighborhood that had a white-throated sparrow in its mouth.
Yeah, I mean, like I just looked down one day getting out of my old apartment, and there's a cat, and in his mouth was a white-throated sparrow, and I was just thinking like this bird, I mean, was just probably a few weeks ago if it just finished breeding in a boreal bog somewhere in northern Canada, and came down here to like a Westfoot off your backyard, and now it's lunch for a cat. It's pretty clearly someone's pet they're let outside. It's just it's just very sad and cruel. And while white-throated sparrows, I mean, I think they are in decline, but they are a very common bird. I mean, but for birds that are a lot smaller populations, this could be really, really, really big. Like we're talking about Smith's longspurs. I mean, that bird has this very, very small wintering range, and so policies about TNR could really impact that species. And it's a ground foraging species. It's very vulnerable to be cat food.
Yeah, and Tony's
it's they're in the grasslands out by the airport, where it's convenient to abandon cats. So I mean, I agree. This is the Urban Wildlife podcast, and I think the misconception is that there is no wildlife in urban areas, which is not true. I've got over 150 species in my metropolitan park down the street, a bird species. That's not including mammals or amphibians or anything else. So it's false that that this doesn't impact wildlife. It impacts human life. It impacts wildlife. It impacts it impacts everything. So I I want to go back to the organization that we built. I think that was, the question. And, we've got the organization has a website. It's called, Tulsans for Public Safety. You can go to www.stoptnr.com, which is kind of crazy that that IRL was still available, but
I was about to say the same thing.
but we have it, and these are people. This organization comes from every background. These are wildlife advocates. These are doctors of veterinary medicine. These are medical doctors. These are lawyers. These are stay-at-home parents. We are people from all backgrounds who think that this is a bad idea for whatever reason. And, we have the benefit in some ways that this has happened various parts of the country. And so there is a specific playbook that I think a lot of these organizations use to exploit municipalities and get their way. So we are fortunate in the fact that this has been going on across the country for a while now, and we kind of understand the MO of these organizations, and we can start to push back, educate the public on what some of the alternatives are. But the flip side of that is they've won victories over a lot of cities, municipalities that are much larger than Tulsa. And so there is a sort of wave of momentum that these organizations have. So it's kind of a balance of what we're dealing with, right?
Something I always like to throw in here, which is that you can get this sense of inevitability. But and in Philadelphia, where I wish we had an organization quite like that, that like when I talk to people I know in the city, in a way, sometimes it sounds like your mayor is a little bit more into TNR than a lot of other places. I think a lot of places, local officials they just want to get these people out of their offices or out of their meetings, and so but there's with that in a way they would I think in some cases they would welcome an organized opposition in a way, because then they could point to say, oh wait, we actually do have people who oppose this TNR thing. And it isn't just me saying it's a bad idea. But I like to put that point out there because I think we can have this weight, the sense of inevitability about it. But the other thing I wanted to just say is this is really impressive. I'm sitting here trying to think of other local, similarly organized efforts around this I don't want to frame it as anti-TNR. It's the wrong way to put it. It's like, because again, you're sort of ceding something to the proponents of it when you say it that way. I think sort of sound animal policy, I guess, that you don't see this kind of organizing get as far as you guys have taken it, and that's really impressive. I don't think like New York City doesn't have anything like that. LA, you've got like a couple biologists, who are slogging, who are slogging through it there. In Philly, and I think nationally, in a lot of cases, organizations that should have this as their mission to do things to protect birds and other animals from whatever the threats may be to them, whether that's power lines that they're flying into, whether that's windows they're flying into, really steer clear of the cat question. I like to, as a quick anecdote, like why this frustrates me. I have a friend who once we were just talking about this and the topic came up, and he said, oh yeah, once I learned about how bad cats are on wildlife, I started keeping my cat inside. And I get so mad about that in a way, because I feel like we get the discourse can get dominated by the people who are so extreme that you forget that that you can have all these little wins of people who don't respond purely on emotion, hear the data and then change what they do. I mean, my wife has a friend who like once she saw her cat kill a bird and now only takes the cat out on leash. I think there are people who can hear the message and do something about it. So it gets extra frustrating when Audubon, whether on the local or national level, sort of shrinks from these kinds of policy showdowns. I want to recognize American Bird Conservancy.
Yes.
Because they're the one, as far as I can tell, the one national group that does put out some that sees this as an important policy policy fight. What did you guys see locally? Is the local Audubon chapter on board with this? Like, what's the organizational response been from local environmental organizations?
The Audubon Society chapter was instantly active and has been the majority of individuals at the meetings and engaged in this in this. So they right away got involved in that. It's a great chapter, and of course because we have great birds in Tulsa, we're the best. So we're the winners of the birding community. But in addition to the Audubon Society, as someone who's a scientist, a biologist, ecologist, one of the groups, so to speak, that came out were scientists that showed up, college professors, people that worked in conservation. But I remember going to meet with a spokesperson for one of our national representatives at one point with a group of college professors, i.e. scientists, to offer our professional advice and support in any legislation, any policy that this person might want to bring forward, because we thought that they might like our expertise. And the spokesperson said, "So who is your lobbyist in Washington?" And we all looked at each other and went, "Why would we have a lobbyist in Washington? We don't." And this spokesperson said, "Well, Representative such and so talks to the lobbyists there, and then the representatives of the groups." And I'm going, so this is one of the problems, I guess, is what I would say. And scientists are notoriously reticent to take public policy positions. It's really not their thing. But this one, I will say, has brought some out of the woodwork. Quite a few. And we actually have a nationally known scientist at Oklahoma State University, Scott Loss, who is the first author on the Loss and Mara paper and is very engaged in this issue scientifically.
This is just fantastic, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation.
Hopefully other people are listening to this, and they are in other places in the country, perhaps other places in the continent, other places in the world, that are facing similar challenges. What advice or what resources do you have to offer if, let's say, someone in their local Audubon chapter or some people are sitting around the water cooler at the faculty lounge at the university, sort of talking about their frustration with local policies around outdoor cats? What would you say to folks who haven't quite organized yet?
Okay, I was just going to say, ABC, American Bird Conservancy, they have the Cats Endorse newsletter, and they had recognized Tulsa for public safety effort and suggested that other cities maybe model after this. And I have to say, I give Stephanie all the credit for putting that together, because it was really her idea to go ahead and engage a marketing team. And I think that's the key, is to gather, and probably a lobbyist makes sense, but it's really all these disparate groups across the country, I think, coming together and forming our own national coalition to fight back against these well lobbied, well moneyed groups. I mean, that because there's so many little pockets of Audubons and concerned citizens all over the country. Some are wildlife enthusiasts, some are birders, some are just rational people from all walks of life. And it just seems like getting us together is really key to having some power. I've been frustrated by these national outside groups who come in. They're so well organized, they're so established, and they play on emotions. I see that they make a lot of money from these objectives that they push. So I do think there is big money behind it. And that motivates some of these larger companies to come in and push for changes in the laws. What I think we really need is more of the groups across the country who are interested in this, who are concerned about releasing animals outside to try to fend for themselves, to come together. And I think that that's important to think about birders, wildlife people, lawyers, doctors, people who are stay-at-home parents, workers of all occupations, just coming together who care about the same issues. And they don't want their children to grow up with a planet overrun with feral cats, which is the direction it seems we're going if we just continue this bad practice. It's a bad public policy. So it just seems like if there's a way for us to come together. American Bird Conservancy has a Cats Indoors newsletter. They recommended that the Tulsa group, who is trying to talk to the public about these issues in realistic, rational ways, maybe we can reach out to other cities who are struggling with the same problems, and maybe find some way for us to join forces so that we can have an impact on this and get the public education that's needed on these important issues.
It's a wonderful idea to bring as many disparate groups together. And one of the things that I think is important about this is I believe this is a social justice issue as well. These kinds of practices can lead to communities that are already disenfranchised, already impoverished, already having great difficulty keeping house and home together, largely through no fault of their own, lowering their quality of life and increasing their trauma.
Yeah, no one's dumping cats in in Philadelphia and Chestnut Hill or in sort of wealthier neighborhoods, right? Yeah.
No, we don't have. I don't have a cat colony in my neighborhood where I live in Midtown Tulsa. And I will not have a cat colony in my neighborhood. We are not overrun with stray cats in my neighborhood. The neighborhoods, when you look at even just Tulsa Animal Welfare, what they put up on their website about where they collect animals in Tulsa, it is more in these communities. And if you do trap, neuter, return, you're going to just exacerbate what is already a serious public health problem and community problem in those areas. We should not ignore our citizens in those communities. We need to do better for those citizens at large. And this is an issue that the mayor has emphasized in his tenure as mayor, the importance of reconciliation, the importance of investigating the Tulsa Race Massacre, the importance of having a resilience officer in our city to help people get out of these historical disenfranchisement situations. And animals at large are a problem. And people in these communities deserve to have pets that they love and can protect as much as any of the rest of us. We know that pets help people live longer, help lower people's stress. They deserve as much as somebody who has all the resources in the world. I think that's an important group, so to speak, that we can also appeal to.
Yeah, and people in those communities have a right to the abundance of wildlife that they would encounter.
Absolutely.
And also the disease, like homeless people in Los Angeles are getting typhus because of these feeding stations where the cats and possums and rats are mixing, because rats are attracted to the feeding stations, and now typhus is becoming an issue in the homeless population in Los Angeles. Yeah, I mean, absolutely is a social justice issue.
With that, I think we'll wrap up the episode. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I think one more time, Zach, what's the website to go to?
Yeah, the website is www.stoptnr.com. So that is the Tulsans for Public Safety. Go there. There's a number of educational resources. There's videos. There's firsthand accounts of how TNR operations are affecting real people in the city of Tulsa. Go there. There's educational resources, all sorts of advocacy stuff, how you can participate, and I really hope that we can get a win here in Tulsa and start turning back this wave of bad public policy and bad animal policy, and start winning for humans, for wildlife, and for the cats themselves. I mean, that's really what it's all about, right?
I'll say again, you can get in touch with us at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com, as did Pam. This is one of our favorite ways to get ideas for stories and for episode topics. And you can also find us at Urban Wildlife Cast on Twitter. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very illuminating. Cheers.